Welcome to LookAhead Radio with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms joining us this afternoon from London, England, where it is a little after 11 o'clock p.m. And with that, Thomas, before we've got a caller standing by, I want to get to him in a moment. But first, I want to say welcome. And very quickly, what's the weather like in your fair city?
It's getting cooler. We've had a bit of rain.
Okay, so you're coming to global climate change. We call it fall here. That's grand.
We call it autumn here.
Autumn, that works. Okay, we've got a caller standing by. Earlier in the program, I was talking about the outrage of Donald Trump's remarks, and I'm going to get some comments from you in just a moment, but I want to get Walter from Alliance on very quickly because he brought up something, and I just want to give him an opportunity to further express himself. And Walter, very quickly, you were commenting on the fact that Megyn Kelly, who was historically, well, shall we say, provocatively dressed, is now all of a sudden covering up. And, you know, I said a few moments ago that the press has been salacious in the coverage of Donald Trump's remarks, but not when it comes to Bill Clinton and the comments made by his accusers and victims. That's a good word. Your comment on that?
Yeah, that's true. But what I wanted to talk to Tom about was the fact that I don't think anything could upset an Englishman because Rupert Murdoch was publishing scandal sheets in the UK long before he came over here and started doing it.
That's a very good point.
And not only that, when I was a kid, you'd go to the beach and, you know, who's looking for the bathhouse? Everybody's just changing on the beach. They didn't give a damn. And would dress up as women. So I don't think too much shocks them. This is nothing, really.
Okay, let's go to that with that one. Tom, let's talk about this for a few moments. How has the remarks of Donald Trump played there in the United Kingdom and London and Britain and in European communities? Has it generated the stir that it has here in the States where all of a sudden national celebrities have said, ooh, the sheer horror of what he said. How could that be said by any male, et cetera, et cetera? What's been the impact there across the pond?
I think they're probably more interested in what the impact is in America, what Americans think about. Now, I have read all the European press, not all the European press, obviously, because there's thousands of them this week. I got a couple of comments from them, which I thought you might be interested in. And basically, they're not commenting on the individuals so much as they are on the dire state of American politics. They're just totally upset and appalled at the way the campaign is being conducted by everyone. The Daily Telegraph says that Trump is crazy and that Hillary is just a rotten candidate. And Der Spiegel says the debate the other night was a low point in the campaign. That's the German newspaper. Le Figaro, the French newspaper, said the campaign had sunk to the level of a rat race rather than the presidential race. And the Italian newspaper Repubblica said that American democracy is sinking. They're not so concerned about, whether, what sort of clothes people wear or whether he's had sex with someone or not had sex or grabbed certain genitals or not grabbed them. They're more concerned about the dire state of American politics, which is very important to them. They want America to be a good, clean, moral, well-run country.
Wait a second. Tom, you were not listening in at the opening of the program, but that was my concern. This is really having a greater negative impact, not on the individuals, but on the whole concept of the political campaigns and the processes here in the United States.
Political process, yeah.
I would tend to agree with that because more attention is being paid to the distraction techniques and the things that don't matter than the things that really matter. And I think Europe's probably right, that we're just like in a bunch of basket case people. We need to be in the sanatorium. The other thing I don't know if anybody's, it's been lost on anybody, that Billy's last name is Bush.
Right. It is.
Yeah, I noticed that. I kept thinking of Billy Carter.
Yeah. So,
I wonder if there might be some connection.
They're actually.
I can't go there. I can't go there on the radio.
Okay. Hey, Walter, thank you very much for your call. I appreciate that, sir. I like that. All right, let's go on to other items associated with this, Tom. And again, Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio with us this afternoon, which you hear every Friday evening here on the talk station and radio stations across the globe, as a matter of fact. Is he expanding his audience? And also with LookAheadNews.com. If I'm not mistaken, it's LookAheadNews.com, his blogs and other stories of note. Tom, the other aspect of this, and we're going to spend a great deal of time, well, wrapping it up, we've heard basically what you've said about the debate aftermath. The question now comes to, is there some concern that we are so focused on our navels, we're navel gazing for all intents and purposes, that we're losing sight of some of the world politique and the world issues? Is there some concern? And then I want to talk about particularly Russia. Is that one of the concerns, though?
Yes, I think that is a concern, but they're still very concerned about the populist demagoguery that is how they see Trump. They see him as a populist demagogue, and they think that he's basically saying things which are totally untrue, and that people are believing it because they want to believe it.
The other question associated with this is the recent dumps, as we're calling them now, from WikiLeaks, and the clear connections that are being made between the administration, the Secretary of State, and her abuse of her authority and privileges. Is that not of a concern? I mean, the whole issue of security. The emails have not really grabbed people here. They look at the FBI report, which says, yes, she was careless, but she did not commit any crime. There's no crime that was committed. It was carelessness, and that is a concern. But it's not like it's not that important. They can understand that. What they can't understand is someone as wealthy as Trump not paying any taxes. Oh, well, wait a second. That is true in so many instances. We have so many companies that have taken advantage of international tax opportunities in Ireland.
That's a big issue here in Europe. Tax avoidance is a big issue.
So I say,
they really don't like that.
Okay, but it is a reality. All right, I've got to move on because I think we need to spend some time on Russia. And a matter of fact, interestingly enough, your list today, and it just coincidentally segues beautifully into some materials I've received on Russia. Tom, what's going on in Europe right now in relationship to Russia? There are some activities that are taking place. As a matter of fact, Russia has requested that all of its expats return to the homeland. Is there some concern there?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's going to be a special meeting next week of EU heads of government. Putin has canceled a trip to Paris, and the Russians are moving tactical nuclear missiles into Kaliningrad. These can reach basically all the Baltic states, Berlin. There's deep concern about Russia.
Okay, I'm looking at two interesting stories, and I'm going to give you the headlines of the stories. We'll take a break and we'll come back to this. Russia suspends plutonium agreement with USA.
Yep. It was last week, actually. Yeah.
Yes, we've had no coverage of this in this country, none. And then another one, Russia withdraws from U.S. nuclear cooperation. I want to chat with Tom Arms. And ladies and gentlemen, what we're talking about this evening is really of international concern as we get involved and get overly conscious of our own political system. I used that term a few moments ago, navel gazing. We're looking at our own belly buttons. We're not paying attention to what's going on around us. We're going to hear more about that in just a moment from Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio. And by the way, his blog, LookAheadNews.com. All one word, LookAheadNews.com. You're listening, of course, to Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
This is Tom Arms with LookAheadNews.com's World Report for the week beginning the 17th of October. Look Ahead broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. Russian aggression in Syria and Europe is under the spotlight next week. First is a meeting on Monday of EU foreign and defence ministers. Then on Wednesday, Vladimir Putin is expected to be in Berlin for talks with Chancellor Angela Merkel and Ukrainian leader Petro Poroshenko. And finally, EU heads of government hold a special summit on Friday and Saturday. Also in Germany for 4 days from Wednesday is the Frankfurt Book Fair, the world's largest gathering of its kind. On Monday, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is questioned at the Ecuadorian embassy in London about the allegations of sex assault in Sweden. On Tuesday, Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi is in the White House for talks with President Obama. The Italian economy, Brexit, and a proposed Euro army are all on the agenda. Another big international visit is that of Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte, who is leading a trade delegation to China. Other international visits are a trip to Japan by the new Brazilian President Michael Temer. Lithuanian President Dalia Grybauskaitė is in Finland, and Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is in Norway. There are 2 big international cases next week. On Tuesday, Equatorial Guinea is taking France to court because of the French pursuit of Vice President Théodore Nguema Obiang Mangwe on corruption charges. The following day, Central African warlord Pierre Bemba will be sentenced at the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. On Sunday, there may or may not be a general election in Somalia, but there will be municipal elections in Chile. And finally, next Saturday is Worldwide Make a Difference Day, when we're all supposed to focus on helping others. And that was next week's News Today from LookAheadNews.com. Stay tuned after this message for the expanded Look Ahead World Analysis.
They say the best things in life are free. So, hey, why are we paying so much for our basic information and entertainment needs? The average cable TV bill has more than doubled in the last 10 years. The price of movie tickets keeps going up. So, exactly what is free today anyway? Well, you're listening to it. Local radio. Support the advertisers that support this radio station. And keep listening. We won't send you a bill. There are still some things you just shouldn't have to pay for.
This is Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com's expanded world analysis for the week beginning the 17th of October. Look Ahead broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. Nuclear missiles in Kaliningrad, threats in the Ukraine, and charges of Russian war crimes in Syria have caused relations between Russia and the rest of Europe to plummet. Furious at French President François Hollande's war crimes charge, Vladimir Putin has cancelled a Paris trip on Wednesday and replaced it with a visit to Berlin to rattle his sabre in a meeting with Chancellor Angela Merkel and Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. Earlier in the week, EU foreign and defence ministers meet, and at the weekend, EU heads of government hold a special summit. Also discussed at the summit will be Brexit. Next week, the London courts hear a major legal challenge to the Conservative government's plans to formally start the process of exiting from the EU without a parliamentary vote. Still in London, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy since 2012. He is trying to avoid arrest on sexual assault charges in Sweden. On Wednesday, he's due to be interrogated by an Ecuadorian prosecutor who will ask for body fluids for DNA tests. Russia will also be discussed when Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi visits the White House on Tuesday for talks with Barack Obama. The 2 leaders' discussions will also cover Brexit, the dire state of the Italian economy, and the impact that a proposed Euro army would have on the future of NATO. Recently elected Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte has threatened to sever ties with America and move closer to China. Next week he takes a step in that direction when he leads a business delegation to Beijing and Shanghai. Duterte will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. The Filipino leader has won Chinese approval by backing away from his country's previous claims to the South China Sea. His murderous treatment of drug dealers has been attacked throughout the Western world. The new Brazilian leader, Michael Temer, will be in Japan for one of his first official presidential visits. President Temer replaced the recently impeached Dilma Rousseff, who annoyed the Japanese by twice postponing trips to Japan during her tenure in office. An Interpol arrest warrant on corruption charges has been issued against Théodore Nguema Obiang Mangwe, the heir apparent in Equatorial Guinea. But the French-driven warrant was made after a raid on Mangwe's Paris home, and the government of Equatorial Guinea is next week taking the French government to the International Court of Justice for breaching diplomatic immunity. Equatorial Guinea is judged one of the most corrupt dangerous and poorest countries in the world. And that was next week's News Today, so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned for Viewpoints Around the World with myself and Lockwood Phillips.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints Around the World with your hosts, plural, Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio, and of course Lockwood Phillips here at the microphone this afternoon. We have Tom Arms live in London. It's 11:35 p.m. his time. Thank you for staying up to talk with us, Tom. I'll go back to the observations I made, and then let's talk about this in relationship to events in the world politic and some concerns. Russia suspends plutonium agreement with USA. Russia has suspended its 2000 agreement with USA to reduce their surplus weapons-grade plutonium. One more time. Russia has suspended its 2000 agreement with the USA to reduce their surplus weapons-grade plutonium. The suspension was made via a presidential decree issued yesterday, and that was sent October 4th. And this story dated October 7th. Russia withdraws from U.S. nuclear cooperation. Okay, Tom, what's going on?
They've been busy modernizing the nuclear system, the nuclear missiles, it's a extreme worry. The other thing, I don't know if it's hit the States, but the Russian defense minister has said that he has approached the governments of Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Vietnam to reopen military bases or to open military bases on their territory. That's Sergei Shoigu.
Tom, let me just remind you, the renowned and anticipated Russian reset. What has happened? And no, in answer to your question, you need to know
Vladimir Putin.
The promise was made in a sub rosa comment between the President of the United States and the President of Russia, and a comment made some 5 years ago. Once the elections passed, we will be able to talk candidly with you, meaning the U.S. and Russia. It hasn't worked very well. And let me just make one other quick comment. The stories I've just read to you, the comments you're telling us, have not been made public in this country. I just find that frightening, and I think it's something that is directly related with an effort on the part of the media to...
I don't think that's...
I think it is.
I don't agree with you. I think that the media is focused. As you know, you've only got so much time on radio. You have only so much space in the newspapers. And foreign news is always second best.
No. This is news that could... The
Cuba was reported in the Miami Herald. And they got an expert from Miami University who said that he didn't think the Cubans were going to really listen to any Russian overtures. I'm not completely certain. I think he's probably right. And I think I agree with the Lithuanian foreign minister who recently said that what he's doing is trying to do a shotgun approach. This is Putin, a shotgun approach, shooting off everywhere, and then offering to make concessions in certain areas because you don't want to be particularly hard hit in places like Cuba or Syria or what have you.
What is behind this?
There's another chap called Igor Satyev, who is a Russian who's now working in London for the Royal United Services Institute, and he says basically that Putin's use of force and propaganda are no different from the Cold War. But the only difference is there's no ideology. There's no ism behind it. And so what you have basically is a return to the imperial competition of the 19th century. He's just another czar.
Well, the other issue associated with this, very interesting, you've clarified something I was asking a moment ago. Tom Arms, of course, of Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com. Remember, LookAheadNews.com. Tom, there are a lot of differences between the old Cold War environment and the current environment. We have a plethora of nuclear facilities. We have a lot of rogue individuals, rogue nations, rogue tribal communities. You look at the Middle East, we have a potentially sensitive and maybe even losing economy worldwide. There are some situations here that I don't know that the players really appreciate the potential impact of further military threats.
It's a very, very dangerous world. I agree. And the fact that the Russian economy is sliding makes it more dangerous, because one way that economy can pull itself up by the bootstraps is by going on a war footing, by producing weapons, and by distracting the population's mind away from the economic problems towards military success, and creating enemies out there which don't really exist.
Well, yes, but at the same time, and we've talked about this relationship to North Korea as well. All right, I've got to make a quick segue into relations with China, and then I want to get back to Russia and the reaction by the French and the British associated with Syria and the topic of war crimes. What are we hearing from China? Is China a participant in any of these activities? Are they simply just stirring the pot and stepping back and watching the reaction?
They're stirring the pot and stepping back and watching the reaction. Okay. They don't want to do anything. They certainly don't want to raise tensions. They're making too much money.
Well,
they're exporting like mad. They don't want to go on any type of war footing if they can avoid it. They want a stable world economy. That's what's in their interest. Now, they also want to have close relations with Russia, because Russia and China are the only two really big authoritarian, totalitarian type states. And these are, if you like, presenting an alternative political system to the democratic Western ideas, and competing against them. They're not competing now because of communism. That's not what they are, but they are competing as centrally controlled authoritarian states. And some people are saying, we need to look at people like Putin. He's not as bad as we think. We need a strong leader. We need an authoritarian figure.
Hey, maybe the U.S. can have a counter-proposal in the form of Donald Trump. Just to throw that out. Let me continue on with another aspect of China. Yeah, another aspect of the Chinese that I'm curious about, and then I want to get back to the French and British relationship with Russia as well. China, of course, the economy there is, you said their economy is growing, but there are some severe concerns about its debt. And I see here, though, you have a note here that a survey shows that the Chinese populace is optimistic about its future on
Incredibly, they're not at all worried about the debt. There's a Washington-based organization called Pew Research Center. You've probably heard of it.
Yes.
They interviewed 3,412 Chinese, and 90% of them said they were not worried about the debt at all. They thought that it was under control. They were really optimistic about the future, about their jobs. They are going to go out and spend as much as possible. And so the economy will continue to grow because all these people are spending. They thought 70% said their personal financial situation will improve. They are worried about some things. They are worried about corruption, but 64% of them said that the president's massive anti-corruption drive would improve the situation. They're also concerned about the environment. As you probably know, there's a lot of air pollution in China. And finally, and here's the crux, one of their biggest concern is the possibility of a conflict with the United States over the South China Sea.
Wow. All right. I want to stick back to the issue of Russia here for a moment before we go to this next break. Both the French and the British have accused Russia of war crimes. That cannot be helping any relationships in Europe with Russia, or is Russia just ignoring that?
No, Russia's not ignoring it. What is happening with that is that Putin was supposed to go to Paris next week to open a cultural center. He's not. He's canceled the trip in protest against the French. The French have really come out. French President François Hollande has said in no uncertain terms that he believes that Putin should be dragged up before the International Criminal Court and charged with war crimes. Now, what are the crimes? Because I thought about this, and they are, there's the 1997 chemical weapons protocol, which prohibits their use, and Syria and Russia were among the two first countries to ratify it. Then there's the 1980 Protocol on the Prohibition of Incendiary Weapons. They've been dropping firebombs. And then there's a Hague Treaty, which dates back to 1899 with various updates, which prohibits the bombing of hospitals and things like museums, charity workers, aid convoys, and so forth, all of which they've been breaching. So they are definitely guilty.
This opens the door to a conversation associated with Brexit in light of the growing, if you will, focus on Russia and the commonality of concern there. I'm curious, and right after this break, what's happening with Brexit and how is the relations with the rest of the European community going between the United Kingdom and the European community now that the UK has prepared or is in the process of preparing leaving the European Union. You're listening to Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com. Stay with us.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Observations of an Expat by Tom Arms. The residents of the Marshall Islands are the ultimate modern age victims. If they don't die from cancer inflicted by nuclear testing, they will drown from rising sea levels caused by climate change. Like most victims, they sought justice. The International Court at The Hague refused it on what was effectively a diplomatic cum legal technicality. The Marshall Islands, population 53,000, are two parallel strings of islands, covering 750,000 square miles of the South Pacific. The best-known piece of real estate is Bikini Atoll. In the aftermath of World War II, the United States was given responsibility for administering and looking after the welfare of the islanders. It did this by exploding 57 nuclear devices on Bikini Atoll and other parts of the Marshall Islands. Over a 12-year period, the United States exploded the equivalent of 200 kilotons a day. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima was 15 kilotons. Not surprisingly, Bikini Atoll is now uninhabitable. Also not surprisingly, the Marshall Islanders suffer one of the highest rates of cancer and radiation-related birth defects in the world. The United States government provides military protection, but not a single oncologist. The islanders contend that all nuclear weapon states are responsible for their bitter legacy. Why? Because Article 4 of the 1968 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty commits signatories to, quote, pursue negotiations in good faith on effective measures relating to cessation of the nuclear arms race at an early date, and to nuclear disarmament, and on a treaty on general and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control. The verdict at the hugely ornate Peace Palace at The Hague was a close-run thing. However, the three key defending states, India, Pakistan, and Britain, pulled a technicality out of their collective legal hat. Without bothering to argue the merits of the islanders' case, they moved to have it thrown out on the basis that the Marshall Island diplomats had failed to negotiate with them before going to court. In the case involving Britain, the judges voted 8-8, and the president of the court was forced to use his tiebreaker. He sided with the UK. India and Pakistan fared slightly better with a 9-7 vote in their favour. Disappointed Marshall Islands lawyer Von van der Biesen said, "It's a dispute that is clear to all the world except for the judges here." Rick Wayman at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation searched for a silver lining and told New Zealand Radio that other non-nuclear countries will be inspired to step up, demand justice, and take action. And indeed, there are some signs of just that, as a six-nation coalition are using the island's diplomatic shoulders to press for a UN General Assembly resolution for a legally binding instrument to prohibit nuclear weapons. For the Marshall Islanders, that is a small consolation, as they've been denied the right of appeal. But they have more pressing problems as raw sewage floats into their kitchen sink, salt water renders freshwater supplies undrinkable, and the cassava and breadfruit crops wither and die. For the Marshall Islanders, climate change is not a debating point, but an all-too-real living nightmare. The highest point in the island chain is only 6 feet above sea level. Because of rising sea levels, the islands are expected to be uninhabitable by the middle of the century, if not sooner. A 1983 agreement with Washington gives them the right of abode in America, and thousands have turned their backs on a tropical island paradise to set up communities in Arkansas, Oregon, and Washington state. Unless a way can be found to hold back the seas, the rest will soon follow. The world's first radioactive climate change refugees.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. Our guest this afternoon, our host, as a matter of fact, is Tom Arms of LookAhead Radio and LookAheadNews.com. Tom, let's talk here for a moment. We've been chatting about the relationship of Europe and Russia. My question then goes to the topic of Brexit and what's happening with the European Union and the relationship with the United Kingdom.
Well, it's getting worse and worse. And the whole thing, Brexit is just a complete shambles, really. There was a paper which was leaked this week, which has been distributed to the cabinet members, came out of the cabinet office, which said that the tax people, the exchequer as it's called over here, would lose $80 billion a year in revenues because of Brexit, because the economy is expected to shrink by nearly 10%.
Now, I saw a note...
That is absolutely staggering. You know, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that is what the civil servants here in Britain are telling the politicians who they're supposed to be serving. Now, there's a case being brought tomorrow by a big law firm, probably the biggest law firm in this country, called Michon de Rea. And it's over the Brexit, and it's saying that the government does not have the right to negotiate over Brexit without a vote in Parliament. And this is very important because the government is refusing to let Parliament vote on it.
Now, wait a second. What do you mean the government is allowed? The Parliament is government, is it not?
No. What it is the majority party is able to select the prime minister, and the prime minister selects the cabinet, and that is the government. And they remain the government as long as they have the support of a majority in Parliament. So as long as the Conservatives have the majority in Parliament, there is a Conservative government. But Parliament is not the government.
Okay, now it's interesting you say that because Theresa May, now the Prime Minister, was in favor of continuing the relationship with the European... But yet she... And
I can tell you, that a lot of people pointed this out, and there's a chap called Sir Michael Lee at the German Marshall Fund who has basically said, he's written a very hard, he's a very respected man, he's written a very hard blog about it, and he says basically Theresa May is putting the unity of the Conservative Party before the interests of the country as a whole, just as David Cameron did when he called the referendum in the first place.
But wait a second. The referendum was growing dissatisfaction among the general populace in the United Kingdom, and probably one of the big issues, I say probably, correct me if I'm wrong, was the issue of immigration and refugees. And by the way, what's the status on that?
Well, it's up in the air. It's up in the air, and that's another issue which is getting more and more headlines, is because there are something like 1.5 million EU citizens living and working in this country, and something like 2 million Brits living in Europe. And the EU has asked Theresa May to ensure that those EU citizens that are living here, many of whom have jobs, they bought homes, they have families and everything else here, ensure that when Britain finally does leave the EU, that their rights will be protected and they'll be allowed to stay. And she has said she will not do that.
Wow.
She's not said she'll throw them out, but she's saying that she needs them as a bargaining chip.
Okay, that's your expectation. Tom Arms, again, of Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com, by the way. Tom, the topic of the referendum, if this suit wins and Parliament chooses not to...
I don't know. I don't know what happens then.
Okay.
I really don't. I think there has to be a general election.
Oh, wow.
That's all I can. That's the only way I could see out of it.
Right.
Would be a general election.
If there were another election,
effectively be a second referendum.
If there were a second referendum, what would be the outcome in your prediction?
I have no idea.
Okay,
it's up in the air still.
Let's move.
It really is up in the air.
All right, let's move to some lighter items here very quickly. Social conservatism in developing world after a Nigerian actress is barred for hugging on screen. Yes. Now, the reason I wanted to raise this was just to point out how socially conservative the developing world is. They really look upon the United States and Europe as Sodom and Gomorrah. Right.
They really do think it is. And now there's this one young lady, her name is Orhama Saldow. She's quite a famous actress in the Hausa language film industry, which is based in the Muslim area of Nigeria. Nigeria is sort of split 50-50 between the Christians and the Muslims. It's actually 40% Christian, 10% what you call animist, that's the old pre-colonial religion, and 50% Muslim. And in Kano, where the Hausa language film industry is based, and it's called Kannywood, you are not allowed to hold hands in public.
Wow. All right. Our guest, and of course the program brought to you by Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com. One more time, LookAheadNews.com. Do look it up on the web or get this sent to you on a regular basis, as a matter of fact. Tom, stay with me. I'll chat with you briefly off air. As always, thank you for being with us this evening. You've been listening, of course, to Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips. Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com.
Look Ahead Radio is a production of the Talk Station.